Remember when Arrow was a really good show? Some people might say no. It was never a good show. I personally do think that this show, when it started, was very good. You could argue that some of us superhero fans, comic book fans, we're not that picky. So we're just happy to see anything superhero related. And in some cases, that's true. But I really do feel like Arrow, when it started out, started at a right time. It was after Smallville, which opened the audiences to a whole new storytelling level of these characters on a network like the CW. But they knew where to take it. They made it dark. The first couple seasons was very inspired by the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. Season one, the whole premise was that Oliver Queen was rescued from an island. He spent 5 years there, and when he comes back home, he's going through PTSD. The one scene that I'll never forget from the pilot is Oliver not being able to go to sleep. He has to sleep by an open window in his mansion, and the rain's hitting him because he's spent so long on this island that that's what he's used to. That's the only way that he can go to sleep. That was some real stuff, some real character stuff there. I instantly felt connected and understood this Oliver Queen character. And throughout the whole season, he has this list from his father, list of people in the city who have done wrong, who are corrupted, who are criminals, and it might not be wide known. So when he took up the mantle of the Hood, the vigilante, as they called him, he went after these guys. He exposed them. And this was simple, but yet effective. It was easy to follow, but still interesting. It even became great every time Oliver Queen ushered the words, "You have failed the city." Every time he went after a new name on the list, every time he went after them. And so now, whenever he does do it, which is very rare, I kind of wish they brought that phrase back. It still rings true. It still holds weight. Even the main villain of season one was the Dark Archer, who eventually was revealed to be Malcolm Merlyn. He was the father of Tommy, which was Oliver's best friend. He was very connected to the family, Oliver's parents, and especially later on, Oliver's sister Thea. So he had deep ties to the family. Him being just as skilled in archery just made this as interesting as you could want. And then the end. The end of season one left us with something that we hardly ever saw, especially with superhero TV shows. I'm talking about the bad guy winning. Not only do you have Malcolm Merlyn successfully performing the undertaking, which was blowing up the lower end of the city called the Glades, where all the poor people lived, and he wanted to decimate it, and he does so. He's successful, and it makes our hero doubt himself. It makes him think that he has filled the city. It makes him think that he has more to come back from entering the next season. And also, his best friend Tommy dies. And this was something that was probably more shocking to me than anything else because Tommy was set up as a character who, yes, they had the love interest with them and Laurel Lance, and that was a little, but I like the dynamic between him and Tommy, how close they were, how even if there were some secrets and some shady moments, that Tommy and Oliver still had that bond, still felt like lifelong friends. And this seemed to be mirroring the relationship like Peter Parker and Harry Osborn from the Spider-Man movies. And so it's just we've seen that story play out. You figured that Malcolm would die and Tommy would take up the mantle, but no, they reversed it. They switched it with Tommy dying. And that brings us to season 2. Season 2 is without a doubt the best season of this show, with side characters like Diggle, who had a great introduction and now has become a mainstay, a true friend to Oliver. Thea, who is Oliver's sister, and sure, maybe she started out as a little whiny and teenagey, complainy, but whatever it is, as soon as they cut her hair, she was more mature. The writing for her was better. The actress grew into this character a lot as well. And then Roy Harper, Started off as somebody from the Glades, the lower end. He was a petty criminal, but he came around. He not only dates Thea, but he becomes a sidekick to Oliver, somebody for him to train, somebody for him to mentor, somebody for him to look after. And I liked all of these dynamics, all of these characters, and how they were introduced. Even Sarah Lance, who this never should have worked because Laurel Lance is traditionally Dinah Lance, and she was supposed to go on to become the Black Canary. So season one, we were all sort of waiting and expecting for that character to get to that point. But in season two, we find out that Laurel's sister, who was with Oliver on the ship, awkward, she presumably died in that crash, but yet we find out that no, she too was on the island with him, and that she has come back as the Black Canary character. She's taken training from the League of Assassins and Nessa Al Ghul specifically, and she was a badass, man. She stepped up as somebody that you thought, oh, she's just the sister. Who cares about her? But no, the actress proved her badassery. She looked great in the costume. She had some great side stories going on, and it was great. Even the flashbacks to the island, which was in season one, but season two worked even more so because, yeah, sure, it was nice to see how Oliver was tortured and how he got those scars all over his body. And yes, it played into that very well. But how this ties into the main villain of season two, I'm talking about Slade Wilson. And he's somebody who started out as a friend to Oliver on the island, how they fought, scratched and clawed their way through this situation to try to survive, how Slade was exposed to the Mirakuru virus, and it messed with his head, and you saw his point of view on things. You saw why he thought Oliver betrayed him, or why he thought Oliver was selfish, and how he took up the Deathstroke character, the mask, and how they played that up. This was just all good stuff. And you even had a point in season one where they introduced the Suicide Squad. Before the movie, before anyone really knew what this group was, the show did it first, and it did it very well. Characters like Amanda Waller, who was very cold-hearted and true to the comics, Bronze Tiger, and Deadshot. Just a lot of these villains that we've already established and seen in this show. You work them in, you bring them back. You even had a cameo by Harley Quinn, of all people. Deathstroke forcing Oliver to choose between killing his sister and killing his mom. Just the stakes were high, the mind games were high. That brings us to the downfall. Season 3 is where the show started to fall off a cliff, and it started with the very first episode. Killing Sarah Lance off. I knew they were going to do this. As soon as they introduced the character, you knew she was only going to be Black Canary version 1. You knew that they would kill her off to get Laurel to the place where she would have to take the mantle. But I grew to like Sarah and this actress so much. I didn't want to see her go. Almost every time she showed up in an episode, I was dreading her death, and then it happened. She looks on the roof, gets hit by arrows, and falls off to her death, and we had to deal with this. It sucked. A lot of the season was played up as who killed Sarah. It was a murder mystery that I still was trying to go along with. As devastated as I was still like, all right, maybe the reveal will be interesting. Maybe the reveal will make sense, and it will make her death worth it if it creates and establishes a brand new villain for us to go after. Only for us to find out that the person who killed Sarah was Thea. A brainwashed Thea. She was brainwashed by Malcolm Merlyn to kill Sarah because Malcolm had history with the League of Assassins and Ra's al Ghul, and so he wanted Thea to be the one that has this debt on her, that has the League of Assassins on her. So that would force Oliver to fight for Thea's honor, go up against Ra's al Ghul, and if he kills him, it will wipe the slate clean, wipe the blood debt that's on Merlin's head. What? huh? This was so confusing, convoluted, and it was the first big storyline that was this confusing, that was this too much writing, too much overlapping, too much stuff that just is too coincidental and just doesn't quite work. It was the first of many. We saw Laurel Lance training to become the Black Canary, and as much as I like the actress Katie Cassidy, she meant well. I just never bought her as this role. I know that she was starting early on at this point, so her training, her screwing up, her just being unsuccessful on almost every run that they did. Yes, it made sense. It was hard to ever buy her seriously. By the time the show wanted us to take her seriously, it just could never quite get there. And then Ra's al Ghul. This is big, right? This should be big. This is Ra's freaking al Ghul, a huge Batman villain, a huge counterpart to any superhero vigilante like character if he's done right. So this was exciting for me to see how they would present this character. And ultimately, I was bored to tears by this guy. Sorry, maybe the actor is great, but it's just nothing about Ra's interests me. He just was a name of a character that I knew, but wasn't represented well. Sure, you had the first fight between them on that mountain in the snow with no shirts on. It was reminiscent of the fight that Roz has with Batman in the comic books. So sure, I like that Easter egg. And I even loved the cliffhanger of this mid-season finale where the fight ends with Roz killing Oliver, giving him a fatal blow with his knife in the chest and him falling off the cliff. This was brutal. This was hardcore. This was daring. Only for the show to come back and say that, no, Oliver is alive. He didn't use the Lazarus pit or anything. It's just, oh yeah, this character found him and just brought him back. Huh? You could at least not take this much of a lazy route into bringing Oliver back like this. The season would go on to fake the death of Roy Harper, which was disheartening. I know that the actor had to leave, so it's not their fault, but it was still a major character that I had grown connected with. Gone, and gone for a while. Oliver would then join the League of Assassins in an attempt to throw off Roz and protect his friends and family, but this only lasted a couple episodes, so anything interesting that they could have done with it wasn't done or had the time to play this out. And it just, this story, this writing, it took a huge hit. When Daredevil showed up on Netflix this season, this show, the writing was on point, the characters were at next level. This is what a superhero crime show, down and dirty, gritty show should be like. And so it was hard. Season 3 was the first one where, in compared to Daredevil, I realized, yeah, this doesn't quite cut it. This writing isn't as good. And then Season 4, which I still think is the worst season of Arrow ever. And a big part of the reason why this season sucks is because of Felicity Smoke. As much as I liked this character in season 1 because she was very much a side character, somebody that they originally only had for maybe a couple episodes to show up and to help Oliver out, but because the fans liked her, they kept bringing her back more and more. And I'm happy for the actress. I'm happy that this gave her a steady gig and she has been a reoccurring character. She's been a main character now for the longest time. But the fact that fans didn't want Oliver to end up with Laurel, and I guess I understand it because the chemistry wasn't quite there. But to put him with Felicity is something that I think the show still hasn't recovered from. It was fan, shipping. It was fans just wanting these two characters to hook up, and we've gotten it. I think we, at this point, could have broken them up and gone past it and moved on. It reminds me so much of Smallville when some people wanted Clark Kent to date Chloe Sullivan. And thankfully, they never did it. And I think the characters' friendships and just them as people were better off for it. I still think that Oliver and Felicity never should have dated, never should have gotten together, especially because she became unlikable in this relationship. She was so angry. She was so argumentative. They almost had to find excuses and reasons for her to pick fights with Oliver and disagree with him just because. Hell, they even gave Felicity an episode of her origins, of her backstory, when she used to be this emo girl with dark hair. Because that was interesting. That was needed. Other characters introduced, side characters like Ray Palmer, who I like Brendan Routh. His version of this character on Arrow never quite worked for me. He did come off as just a low budget Tony Stark, especially when he wore his superhero suit that looked like a low budget Iron Man suit, and the effects never quite looked right. They had a love triangle between him and Felicity with Oliver, and just no, stop with the love triangles. It never works. It's never interesting. John Constantine was a nice introduction, a nice surprise, especially when it pertained to bringing Sarah Lance back to life. So, yes, it's almost like the show, the writers realized how dumb it was to kill Sarah Lance off, so they brought her back with the Lazarus Pit. And as dumb as it was to have to kill her, bring her back, and then kill her again in season 3 just to bring her back once again, I like that they did it. I think that now that she's been on Legends of Tomorrow and she's a leader on that show, she's grown to be even more of a likable character. The main villain of season 4 was a huge drop off as well. I like Neil McDonough, the actor who plays this villain, but Damien Dark, it's something about him being a guy that knows magic, never gelled with the show in the realistic tone. I know that they've introduced shows like The Flash and Supergirl and Legends by this point, so you think that maybe everything can be raised and elevated, but Arrow works better as a realistic show. Arrow works better when he's going up against non-superpowered people, and Damien Dark is a clear case of that. They had been building up throughout this whole season of this graveyard scene, and we would see this grave and Oliver mourn over it, and so it would have us guessing which character is going to die. It had to be a major character. They kept building it and building it and building it, only to reveal that they killed off Laurel Lance. What? Really? I know at this point Oliver is with Felicity, so I guess they felt like they didn't know what to do with Laurel if she wasn't going to end up with Oliver, but this still reeked of desperation. This still reeked of, hey, Game of Thrones is popular with killing off major characters, so let's do that here as well. And it didn't work. It just pissed more people off. Even people who didn't like Laurel. They didn't want to see her go out like this or get killed off like this in a lazy way. Speaking of lazy, the flashbacks went to shit. Even ever since season 3, where they took Oliver out of the island, brought him to Japan, and I hated that from the beginning. Like I said in the pilot, you saw Oliver and how messed up he was from being on an island for 5 years and how he couldn't adjust to the real world or how hard it was for him to. Now you're going back and you're retconning this and saying, oh no, he didn't spend all 5 years there. He spent a year in Japan, and they even had an episode where he went back home without anyone knowing just because, and they had him dealing with all these characters and doing all of these things that I could never buy into every time they swapped from the main story, the present day story, to this island or to this flashbacks Japan stuff. I hated it. Season 4, they brought him back to the island because why not? At this point, they were grasping at straws, and they introduced a new love interest, and they introduced new villains, and they introduced magic to try to make it make sense with Damien Dark, and it never did. It all was falling apart before our very eyes. Season 5. I don't think Season 5 is the worst thing ever. It's just Season 5 introduced a lot of new things to the show that I still don't love, and it has stuck around since. For example, the end of season 4, you really got the impression that the Team Arrow was breaking up as far as Diggle and Thea, and that Oliver was going to go back to the basics, be on his own, go back to what we liked from him in the first 2 seasons, and it would work. But no, the writers had the brilliant idea to introduce a new team. Because Oliver has to have a team at this point. They've gotten so used to it. Wouldn't it have been cheaper just to keep it with him by himself? You brought in characters like Evelyn Sharp, who was in the last season pretending to be a fake Black Canary, and that was horrible. And I never got into that actress ever. Dinah Drake, especially because she works for the police department, but I've never gotten used to her. I've never cared about her. I've never seen her character, anything with her backstory, anything with her boyfriend, anything that they've tried to do. I've never cared about the actress. I've never cared about the character. Mr. Terrific, Curtis, I think he's fine when he's Felicity's sidekick, when he's somebody that's just working the computers and that's it. But they tried to make him a superhero, Mr. Terrific. And I thought he looked goofy with this costume and the face paint, which I know is from the comics. It still looked goofy as hell. Every time we tried to take this actor, this character seriously, I just couldn't. I like that he's the show's first gay character. Like that's great. But he never should have been a superhero vigilante on the streets fighting crime, especially because he always got his ass kicked. Ragman is somebody that was probably the only character that I thought was interesting because he had a messed up backstory. He was so angry. He did have a creepy look to him. He started off almost like a villain, and then they were able to turn him and make him good. It just sucks that they had to get rid of this character because of his superpowers. I guess he cost too much to use in every episode. And Wild Dog. Wild Dog is somebody that I've hated since day one. This actor really annoys me with his one-liners and him trying to be funny and calling everyone Haas and just being overly annoying, always questioning Oliver. He wants to be the rebel. He wants to do things his own way. He wants to complain about Oliver killing, but yet he uses a gun. He has his Jason Voorhees mask and just nothing about this guy or his story with his daughter and trying to get custody of her. I never cared about this guy at all. In fact, I've been begging for his death on this show for what? 3 years now? Close to it? Oliver, we found out, has a son, which sure they set up in a previous season with the mother keeping it a secret, and that was interesting. But when they brought this character in, William, and I think they just wanted to change up the dynamic of Oliver to make him a parent, but they never fully committed to it. He just became a nuisance. He just became somebody that never listened to Oliver and always snuck out and always got involved and in the way of all of these scenes. And then they would write him to talk like he was 5 years old sometimes, but he was really like 14. And then the next episode he would go back to being his age, and it was so back and forth. The main villain was Prometheus. Prometheus is a dude who, yet another Archer, another villain who mirrors the look of Green Arrow, and just something that they've done countless and countless times. Now they've still have done it since. It's tired, it's old. I like the character Adrian Chase. I like the actor and how dark he was and how brutal he was and his motivations for going after Oliver. But the look itself, Prometheus does not look like this in the comic books, so they could have been more creative, done more with this look instead of going for the same old, same old. And I think if you're gonna carry over a villain through multiple seasons, this is one of the ones to do it. They would eventually bring Slade Wilson back, but like he should be a more reoccurring character. He should be in a lot more episodes. It sucks that Manu Bennett gave such a great performance as a great villain, and if you don't want to keep him as a villain and just have him be a sort of ally for Oliver, let's have him show up. I don't like this team. I don't like this dynamic. I don't like how the whole season played up. Oh, is Oliver a killer? Because he spent so many episodes killing people with arrows through the chest and no one ever really said anything. But yet when they introduced the Huntress as a character, Oliver would attack her and get on her for killing people. No killing. But yet was like, dude, we just saw you kill people in the last episode. What's your deal? They even put poor Huntress in prison and we haven't seen her since. doing everything that not only has Oliver done himself, but this group. Like I said, Wild Dog uses a gun. It just it is a dumb thing to do because they kept going back and forth with it. They kept addressing it and bringing it up and then dropping it only to bring it up the next season over and over again. And season 6, I guess we should talk about season 6 because you brought in this FBI agent who was investigating Oliver Queen to prove that he's the Green Arrow. And I got so annoyed of this actress and how many times she kept popping in and popping out, showing up whenever the story wanted to dictate it, as opposed to making her a fleshed out three-dimensional character. She was just so cliched, so much of this investigation or Oliver hiding his identity. We've done this so many times in the earlier seasons when it was actually interesting that you can't go back to it. You can't be lazy and go back to things that we've already taken care of. We've already had Oliver getting out of this situation multiple and multiple times. Also, they brought Laurel Lance back, not back from the dead technically, because of the Flash and how they introduced Earth 2 multiple universes. We brought in Earth 2 Laurel Lance, who was actually a villain named Black Siren. Now, this could have been interesting. This could have been made for some interesting dynamic, especially with Laurel and Oliver, since he did have a past with the real Laurel. So seeing her as a villain, fighting her as a villain would be big for him. And if you had to have some conflict between Oliver and Felicity, that would be the thing to do it. But no, they never quite did that. They just had her working for the villain. They spent all of this time having Quentin Lance try to get through to her, and so she felt very one-dimensional. It didn't do the actress any justice to have her, especially by this point. She ended up turning good, but it was such a switch. They had her kill so many people, they had her do so many evil things without real remorse, to all of a sudden, I guess a new writer came in and said, let's have her turn good because this is taking too long. It's a huge thing when you have so many villains, so many characters, so many heroes, that a lot of these other characters are getting lost in the shuffle. And I think that was a huge thing with Laurel. The flashbacks, the island flashbacks. I didn't even talk about what they did in season 5 and how much it pissed me the fuck off. Because obviously I hated him going to Japan. And yes, I hated what they did in season 4 with the magic. But season 5, they took him to Russia, which I know the character Anatoly and all of that was established in season 1. So I guess maybe if you had to take him out of the island, this is the only time to do it. And it should have been for one episode. And then maybe he gets screwed by these mobsters and brought back to the island. And so he actually does spend a long enough time there. But no, he spends all of this time in Russia only for him to fake him with the hair. Remember in the pilot episode when he had the long hair, he had the beard, and it made you think, wow, this guy has been through some shit. Only for season 5 to retcon it and say, no, that was a wig, and that was fake beard, and he staged and faked his rescue, and it destroyed the hardship that we thought he had to go through to find anyone to get rescued, to treat it like Castaway almost, to where he was having such a hard time being back in the real world, where no, he has been living 2 of these 5 years in civilization with other people. It's bullshit. It's bullshit, and it messed me up so much. I still haven't forgiven the show for that twist. But back to season 6, they introduced this character Diaz. And I have not liked this actor. I have not liked him as a villain. I know that I've wanted Oliver and Green Arrow to stay away from superpowered villains, but this is not the street level criminal that I'm looking for. It's just this guy with his raspy voice and his annoying attitude and his, oh yeah, I'm just a random thug, but I'm able to take Green Arrow in a hand-to-hand fight scene. A guy who's been trained by some high-level fighters in martial arts. Get the fuck out of here. We've seen so many scenes of Oliver training and doing those crazy pull-ups on the poles. This character Diaz cannot take him. It would be perfectly fine if Diaz was a side villain for one of the side heroes and have him carry over through there. Oliver, he needs bigger and better things. Diaz is a character that they've somehow, some way kept alive, kept around. He's still involved in season 7. I am begging for the show to kill him off. I am begging for the show to get rid of him. Some producer likes him. Somebody, maybe they're dating him, or maybe he paid someone off or something, because they just won't get rid of this fucker. They got rid of Slade Wilson. They got rid of Malcolm Merlin even by this point. They've gotten rid of Prometheus. They've gotten rid of a lot of these villains that were a lot more interesting. Season 7 did do something fairly interesting, I'll admit, with revealing Oliver's identity. It took a little too long to get here, but at least now they committed to it. They had him reveal himself. He did prison time for his vigilante-ness, and I appreciated the fact that Oliver spent a lot of episodes in prison. It wasn't just a one and done. It wasn't just like, oh, here's a backdoor way to get out. There were even times where he had the chance to get out, but he stayed because he knew that his family wouldn't be safe. He knew that he would be a criminal and always on the run. So they committed to this. They fully committed to it. Had Diggle go off and join his wife, a part of Argus, so he's doing his thing. You had Felicity going darker, and all right, fine. They've done other bad things. They've killed off Quentin Lance, who was a great character that were always able to find something interesting for. This actor was great. I know he requested to leave himself, so again, not their fault, but still, the way that he died was such a weird and awkward thing, and they've done this reoccurring with certain characters who were fatally stabbed or shot. They rush them to the hospital. They treat it like, oh no, they're going to be okay. And we even talk to them for a little bit on the bed. And then we leave, only for the doctor to run out and say, they're dead. Sorry. What? We were just talking to them. You just said they were going to be fine. Now they're just dead? It was so bizarre and so weird. And the show this season has introduced Oliver to have another sister. Why? I don't need him to have another sister. I miss Thea. They've taken Thea out. They got rid of Roy. They got rid of Thea. They've gotten rid of a lot of the characters that we've been with since episode 1, season 1, and they've gotten rid of just to bring in new characters that are not as interesting, that aren't given the time and the care and the effort put into their stories, to their backstories, to them, their writing as fully developed characters. I feel nothing for it. They're all cardboard cutouts. A lot of these side characters, you could just place cardboard cutouts, have somebody do voiceovers, and I'm going to get the same level of impact. The action is always well made. I don't want to be a complete dick and say that there's nothing watchable or good about this show. I obviously still watch for a reason. The action is always shot well. They do always do innovative and cool things with Oliver and his arrows and his fighting styles and these villains. And so I want to give it credit there. But the lack in writing, the lack of story, the lack of character development, the lack of originality, the repeating itself. This show has repeated itself with themes and plots so many times over by this point that I am shocked that it's getting renewed for a season 8. You guys have shown that you're creatively bankrupt and you don't have anywhere else to go. This show should have ended after season 5 when you were done with the 5 years of flashbacks. And hell, they've brought flashbacks back, but it's flash forwards. They've gone full Lost, where we're now seeing the future. We're seeing an older William. We're seeing older versions of Roy Harper and Dinah Drake and Renee and all of these characters that I couldn't give a fuck less about. And they're trying to add this mystery and intrigue. And seeing the future doesn't do shit for me. It doesn't. Maybe if it has a payoff, but as of right now, I am this close to fast forwarding every time they do a flash forward scene. I am so frustrated watching this show. This might be the most frustrating show that I'm currently watching on TV because it used to be so good. It used to be so great. I am constantly putting on a new episode every week of Arrow and hoping and praying that I see a resemblance of that greatness that used to be there. I'm hoping for moments and scenes and episodes, which once in the blue moon it happens, but it's so rare now. It's so infrequent now. I know many people have stopped watching. I know I've complained about this show countless times over and over. I know some people are probably sick of me continuing to watch this and still complaining about it, but I had to get this off my chest. I had to talk about where I thought this show went wrong, how consistently wrong they've gotten this show and still continue to this day. So, guys, let me know in the comments below, what do you think? Let's debate this. Are you somebody who never thought Arrow was good and stopped early? Are you somebody who agrees that this show has sucked since season 3 or 4? When have you stopped watching the show, if you've stopped watching? Or do you defend it and still think that it's still good all the way up until season 7? God bless you. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Later.
Oh yeah, today I feel super